Okay, so welcome to week 5 of Psych 101 General Psychology. This week we're talking about states of consciousness, and today we're talking about drugs and how drugs affect consciousness, right? And your thinking and behavior and that kind of stuff. So we're going to talk about psychoactive drugs. Not all drugs are psychoactive. Psychoactive drugs are drugs that affect your thinking, your perception or how you make sense of things, your memory, okay? So, and there's a bunch of different things, okay? So let's get into that. Before we talk about drugs, you should know what we mean by dependence, okay, or dependence on drugs. When you are dependent on drugs, when you become dependent, that means that you are addicted, okay? Lots of drugs can be addicting, and there's different forms of addiction. There's different forms of dependence. You can have what's called physical dependence, okay? Physical dependence means that your body is physically dependent on the drug, okay, and it wants more and more. One thing that indicates that you have physical dependence is that you have developed what's called tolerance, which means you need more and more of the drug to produce the same effect. We see that with all drugs. Let's say like alcohol, for instance. You know, when you first start drinking, it probably doesn't take much to get you drunk. And as you become a seasoned drinker, so to speak, and you've been doing it for a while, you can hang a little bit more, and you can take more alcohol, to get you drunk. Same thing with other drugs, okay? You develop tolerance when you get basically physically addicted to them. You just need more and more of the drug, okay? That's what that means, that's tolerance, okay? Withdrawal is another symptom of physical dependence. Withdrawal means that you basically, you have physical symptoms that you experience when you don't get the drug, okay? You are addicted to something, and when you're not taking the drug, you feel any number of uncomfortable symptoms. You may get, for instance, like let's say you're addicted to caffeine, right? You drink too much coffee and you're hooked on caffeine. And let's say you haven't had any coffee, right? This morning or something like that. So you may feel sleepy, you may feel grouchy, you may have a headache, right? If you've gone without your drug, so to speak, you're going to experience some uncomfortable symptoms. And the symptoms will vary depending on the drug, but they're usually the opposite of what the drug gives you. Okay, so if the drug makes you feel really good while you're on it, when you're not on it, you're going to feel awful. Okay, but there's a number of symptoms, but those are withdrawal symptoms. That's how you know you're addicted. You develop tolerance, you need more and more of the drug, and then when you try to get off the drug, you feel that you can't because you just start getting all these bad feelings or these uncomfortable feelings that make you want to just take the drug. Okay, that's physical dependence. Now you can also become psychologically dependent, which means that you need more of the drug to continue to feel good. Okay, like you need, for instance, you need the drug, you need the weed, let's say, to continue to feel happy. That without it, you don't feel happy or something like that. That's psychological dependence. Okay, so you can become physically dependent, psychologically dependent. That means you are addicted. And lots of drugs, of course, are addicting, but we're only going to talk about some today. There's different classes of drugs. There are the so-called stimulants. So stimulants, they're called stimulants because they speed up the functioning of the central nervous system. They speed things up, okay? It increases breathing, heart rate, adrenaline, that kind of stuff, okay? That's what stimulants do. So they stimulate the function of the central nervous system and the other bodily organs, okay? They can also increase dopamine. And remember, dopamine makes you feel good. These drugs are often called uppers, okay? A street name, uppers, okay? There's other things. There are all kinds of street names, but one thing that they were commonly called in the past was uppers, okay? An example of those drugs, class of drugs is called amphetamines. Amphetamines include several drugs. They are stimulants. They increase heart rate, breathing, etc. They also make you feel good because they increase dopamine. So amphetamines, some examples would be speed, right? Speed and methamphetamines, commonly called meth. Also MDMA, commonly known as ecstasy. So these are drugs basically that are manufactured in labs, okay? They're illegal to manufacture, but people manufacture them in labs. And when you take them, they give you what's called euphoria. So they make you feel really good, not just good, but really good. That's euphoria. Euphoria is basically a feeling of extreme happiness. So they make you feel really good. And then afterward, when the drug wears off, that's followed by a crash. Then you feel awful, okay? At higher doses, these drugs can cause nausea, right? Cause your blood pressure and your heart rate to rise. And then could also cause anxiety, hallucinations, paranoia at higher doses. So at first they make you feel good, but they also elevate your heart rate and blood pressure, so you feel a sense of energy, you feel like you want to party, and you could party all night long or do whatever you're doing. But if you take too much, right, you can get nauseous, start vomiting, or, you know, if you take too much, because if you get too much dopamine, right, if it increases dopamine too much, you will start acting psychotic. You will be acting like you're out of touch with reality. You become anxious. You begin to hallucinate and be paranoid and thinking that people are out trying to get you and trying to kill you. Think you see demons and ghosts and things like that. I don't know by experience. I haven't taken any of these drugs myself, with maybe a few exceptions, not really any of the illegal ones, only alcohol. But that's what they does. That's my understanding based on how it affects the body and the things that I have read. Okay, some of you may have had personal experience with this, but that's what these drugs do. These stimulants, these amphetamines, and you know, some of them are injected, like I said, and there's a crack pipe or a meth pipe. There's several things that people can do to basically, ingest these drugs. Okay, so those are the amphetamines. They're stimulants. There's oh, and here's pictures for you. This is, I believe, in your textbook. That's where I got it from. These are called, and I call these faces of meth. So you can see what methamphetamines basically do to you over time. Okay, you can see that first person on the upper left there, right? You can see her picture right on the, all the way on the corner. That's what she looked like before actually, that's what she looked like the first time she was arrested for having meth on her. And then 1 year later, they arrested her again, and that's what she looked like. You can see how meth begins to kind of rot your skin and I don't know if you can see the teeth on any of this, because it'll begin to rot your skin and your teeth. And basically, it's rotting you from the inside. It's destroying, basically, you from the inside. It's really bad for you. Other pictures there, you can see some of these people look horrible after a year or after 6 months, or some of these people after 5 years of use. Look at this guy over here with the long hair. Down here, that male right there, if you can tell what he looked like before and after, right? You know, big difference, okay? Stay away from this stuff. Look at the last one right there on the corner, the lower right-hand corner. Look at what she looks like, okay? I mean, you're gonna look like a zombie after a while, okay? It's rotting you from the inside, okay? It's destroying you, okay? You don't wanna do that stuff, but people do it because it, you know, feels good, gives them more energy, a sense of power, that kind of stuff. But it's a horrible thing to do. And it's quite a problem, quite an epidemic here where we live and in other places, okay? Here's a drug that you didn't think of, don't think much about, but actually, not the cola, but cocaine. Cocaine is also a stimulant. Cocaine is more of the rich man's drug, okay? Cocaine is actually a natural drug found in the coca plant leaves. So the plants that actually grow naturally in places like, South America, near the equator, it kind of grows there, and farmers now grow it, on purpose. But basically, that's where cocaine comes from. It comes from a plant, okay? And they turn it into that white powder, okay? It causes euphoria. Again, it makes you feel really good, gives you a sense of energy, of power, and pleasure. That's kind of what stimulants do. They make you feel good, okay? And they give you more energy and power. But cocaine also deadens pain. So it suppresses the pain. It makes you feel less pain and suppresses appetite, okay? It reduces your appetite, which is related to the fact that the poor farmers who often grow the stuff in like South America will often, and some of the indigenous populations over there will often chew on the leaves of the coca plant, right, from where cocaine comes from, to actually reduce their appetite because they're very poor, they don't have enough to eat. So that's something they do to cope with that, so they don't feel so hungry, okay? Cocaine is highly addictive and very dangerous, right? It can cause convulsions and death, basically. You can overdose very easily. It can be snorted, injected, right? You can snort it through your nose. You can inject it, with a syringe. You can ingest it, chew on it, comes in many different forms. And there's a picture there of a cola can. I should have a picture of a Coca-Cola, actually. Believe it or not, Coca-Cola or Coke in the past actually used to contain cocaine, okay, before they knew how bad it was. And then they took away, the cocaine, and now they just call it Coke. And it's called Coke because it comes from cocaine, okay? It still has something very addicting in it, which is sugar, okay? But no longer does it have any cocaine. A lot of those cola drinks, right, used to actually have cocaine in the past, and Coke is the most well-known of those cola drinks. They used to use cocaine for all sorts of things. They used to put it in toothpaste and in toothache drops, okay? They thought it was this miracle drug that can cure all sorts of things, reduce pain, and make you feel good. And, they just thought it was this wonderful thing. They used to put it in everything. And of course, people can snort it, with dollar bills and stuff, make a little straw and snort it in through their nose and stuff. It's a kind of a rich man's drug. It's very expensive. Okay, I don't know how expensive it is because I don't buy this stuff. But I know that there's cartels making lots of money out of cocaine, okay? You're selling weed, making weed, yeah, maybe you could make some money, but you can make really big bucks with cocaine. The people who control the cocaine drug trade and stuff like that, those cartels are, they make billions of dollars every year. That's just how profitable it is. As a matter of fact, they smuggle into the country on these old planes, these DC-10 planes that you can buy used for like $100,000. They'll load them up with cocaine, smuggle them into the country, and then they'll take the drugs out and just abandon the plane because $100,000 is absolutely nothing in comparison to like the $100 million worth of drugs that they smuggled in. So they'll just abandon the plane, okay? So that's cocaine, all right? It's a very harmful drug, okay? Remember, increases dopamine, okay, makes you feel good. And then there's also crack cocaine, which made the drug even more dangerous because crack cocaine can be smoked to achieve a high, and it enters the brain very rapidly, more rapidly, and can enhance the user's experience. Crack cocaine is the poor man's cocaine, the cheaper version of cocaine. The white powder is very expensive, but then somebody came up with crack cocaine, and then it became readily available to even the poor people, and then it created a huge epidemic, and we had a whole bunch of crack addicts out there, right? We still do, but it used to be worse, okay? And just a little bit of history here about crack. During the 1980s, right, the drug laws were rewritten to punish crack cocaine users more severely than cocaine users because crack was the drug of the poor people, of the people of color, right? And they punished them, they threw them in jail for a long time for having crack, whereas the rich people who were who if they got caught with cocaine, they would get a slap on the wrist and not much would happen to them, okay? So very discriminatory laws, right? The whole war on drugs thing was a whole bunch of discrimination, by the Reagan administration, basically to incarcerate a bunch of people of color is really what it was, and take away their voting rights and all that stuff. There's a lot of stuff written about that, but really bad stuff, right? But yes, crack caused a big epidemic, and then they try to, punish these people by passing discriminatory laws, okay? Treating poor people, people of color differently than the richer people, the white people who were using the cocaine instead. But now, of course, everybody uses everything, okay? So lower income, inner city minority populations received the harshest punishment, during that whole war on drugs. The whole war on drugs thing was a sham, and it's been revealed that it was basically meant, to punish these people who were basically using crack or using weed, people who they considered undesirable, poor people, people of color. It was a sham, basically. It was not, it's not a good thing that they did. Other stimulants, nicotine, believe it or not, is a stimulant. It's what you find in cigarettes, in cigars, okay, in tobacco, okay? It's very addictive, very toxic, right? And it occurs naturally in tobacco. It's grown in, tobacco plants, the tobacco leaves, they dry it. After they grow the plant, they dry it, and then they can crush it and turn it into that powder that goes into cigarettes, or roll up the leaves and make cigars out of it. Nowadays, they even have vaping, right? Electronic cigarettes that supposedly don't emit any harmful smoke, any harmful vapor, right? But still giving you the addictive drug of nicotine, okay? It produces a slight rush, makes you feel, you know, good, you know, raises your blood pressure, your heart rate. It's a stimulant after all. And that slight rush, right, is because of the dopamine. Also has a relaxing effect, relaxes you a little bit, but is highly addictive, okay? Nicotine is extremely addicting. It is legal, but it is one of the most addicting substances known, okay? About 99% of the people who basically start smoking are gonna get addicted to it, okay? And once you get addicted, good luck getting off the drug, okay? Good luck, you know, being able to quit. A lot of people try it, most people are not successful. Nowadays, they have nicotine patches to give you a little bit of a nicotine, you know, a little dose here and there to help you reduce your cravings and help you stop smoking. So there are treatments now that can help, but it's very, very hard quitting smoking. Very, very hard getting off the nicotine. Okay, I've had students who have told me about how hard it is. I had a student who used to be a drug dealer who had been to prison many, many times, and he messed up his life at the beginning. He said he's been in like every prison in California, and he's, you know, went through so much horrible stuff, so much trouble, so much trauma in his life. And he says of all the things he's done, he says quitting smoking is the hardest thing he's ever tried to do, and he can't do it. But this is a guy who went to prison, who's overcome all that hardship actually, and then went to school and got off of a lot of the drugs except smoking, I guess. And then became an honor student, eventually graduated and went to UCLA. He's now in UCLA. Quitting smoking is the hardest thing he's ever tried to do, he says. That's how addicting that stuff is. If you're not addicted to it, don't even start, okay? Don't do it. There are risks, of course, with nicotine, with smoking, okay? Risks that you're gonna develop heart disease, stroke, cancer, many types of cancer. It's horrible for your body. It will ultimately kill you, okay? Not all people who smoke will die of basically things related to smoking. But let's just put it this way, okay? If you're a smoker and you never quit, chances are you're gonna die in your 60s on average, okay? You might even be more unlucky than that and die in your 50s, or maybe you're lucky and you live into your 70s. My wife's mom was a heavy smoker and she made it to like 72. But I know people who have died, you know, at like 58, 59 from cancer because they were heavy smokers. It's just a very, very bad thing. It will shorten your life. You know, the sooner you quit smoking, the longer you'll probably live. Okay, it's a really horrible thing. And I can't believe it's legal, to tell you the truth. It's just an awful thing. Stimulants. There's other stimulants. There's also caffeine. Now, caffeine you may not think of as being that bad. And usually it's not that bad, but it is a drug. It is addicting and it can cause problems. Okay, caffeine is a mild stimulant. It stimulates you a little bit, not a whole bunch. If you have more, it'll stimulate you more, okay? But it can be found in coffee, okay, in tea, in cola, in chocolate, okay? It's found in those energy drinks. You know those energy drinks like Red Bull and all that stuff? Yeah, guess why they give you so much energy, right? Tons of caffeine in them, okay? And they claim that it has all these bunch of other things, all these other ingredients that are good for you. It's the caffeine that's having the effect, okay? And that's what you're gonna get hooked on. So it helps maintain alertness. Yes, people are more productive when they drink coffee, when they're on caffeine. You know, it makes you more alert. You can focus more. You can work harder, you know, longer and pay more attention, right? But large doses, like 5-6 cups of coffee a day, which, you know, some people do meet that criteria there. Large doses can cause insomnia. You can't sleep. Hey, if you have trouble sleeping, ask yourself, right? Are you a coffee drinker? And are you drinking coffee before you go to bed? If you are, you're just making it harder for you to fall asleep. So it'll cause insomnia, you can't sleep. It'll cause nervousness, right? You know, anxiety, you know, headaches, twitching, because it's a stimulant. And if you get too much of it, you're not only alert, you start acting like you're anxious and you can't relax. Nausea, right? Higher doses, irregular heartbeat, and even death. You can overdose on caffeine. It takes really high doses. But yeah, you can have a heart attack and die if you stimulate your body too much. If your heartbeat goes up too high, too much stimulation, and you can have a heart attack and die. Okay, usually before that though, what will happen is if you have too much caffeine, it can trigger a panic attack. So be aware of that, right? I know a lot of you probably, you know, eat chocolate, you know, chocolate usually in small doses, right? Caffeine there, but in those, you know, especially that Starbucks, right? You know, those large coffee, Starbucks really popularized coffee, right? Made it taste better. And now we have a bunch of people a bunch more people addicted to coffee, where before it was just that black stuff, that didn't taste great, but it helped people get through the day. And Starbucks, made it cool to drink coffee. They made it tasty. And by the way, more calories and more fattening too. And then now they have a whole bunch of other companies trying to be like Starbucks. Starbucks is a very successful company because of what they did with coffee. And they pay their employees well, and they also provide good benefits. But, hey, the caffeine is what's addicting. That's why people keep going back. I tell you the truth, how much of a straight arrow I am, how much of a good boy I am. I don't even drink coffee. Okay, I have in the past, but I never got addicted to it, and I stay away from it. Besides, if you drink a lot of coffee, it also makes you want to pee a lot. So I really don't want to be doing that all the time, right? Especially now that I'm older. I mean, that's already an issue, and you don't want to be peeing all the time if you're drinking coffee. There's other drugs. There are drugs that slow down the central nervous system. Those are called depressants. So they depress the body. They slow things down. And then there are several classes of those drugs. There are the barbiturates. The barbiturates are the major tranquilizers, okay? So when you take these drugs, they make you sleepy. They have a sleep-inducing effect, so a sedative effect, okay? Overdose can lead to death because if you overdo it with these drugs depress the central nervous system. They slow things down. If you overdose, you'll stop breathing and die. Your heart will stop. You'll stop breathing and die, okay? They're highly addictive, okay? You can get very addicted to these drugs, and you can develop tolerance as well. And you can see what some of the drugs look like, okay? Benzodiazepines are the minor tranquilizers. They lower anxiety, they reduce stress. So they're not as potent as the barbiturates, but they still, slow things down. They're often prescribed as sleeping pills. So they help you sleep, they relax you, right? And here's just some examples of some of those drugs: Valium, Xanax, Ativan, Rohypnol, many others. There's a whole bunch of different sleeping pills, but they're also very addicting, right? Very addictive and dangerous to mix with alcohol. Okay, actually a lot of drugs are dangerous to mix with alcohol. You can die from a lot of these drugs if you mix them with alcohol, or can get very sick and potentially die. Okay, very addicting, these sleeping pills. Okay, so be careful. If you're having trouble sleeping, chances are it's psychological. There's something you can do to make it better, easier for you to fall asleep without resorting to drugs. If you do resort to the drugs, you can get addicted to them, and then what will happen is you won't be able to sleep without them if you get hooked on them. And then, of course, they're dangerous. If you overdo it and you overdose, you can die. Other depressants, hey, the most popular drug probably, and the most commonly used depressant is alcohol. It's another drug that is, it's legal, just like caffeine and nicotine, right, and cigarettes. But, depressants, right, alcohol actually slows things down. Sometimes people think that alcohol is a stimulant because they drink it and then they feel like partying, or now they're in the mood for sex or whatever. They think it's a stimulant. No, it's not. It is a downer. It's a depressant. It slows things down. Yes, when it slows things down, you do feel more relaxed. You might feel a little bit happier or in a better mood, but it's not a stimulant. Alcohol has its effects via GABA. It increases GABA. And if you remember when we talked about biological psychology, GABA is that neurotransmitter that slows down the firing of the neurons, okay? So when you drink more alcohol, you get more GABA, things slow down, less neurons are firing, and then you're more relaxed. Your memory suffers as well, your decision-making suffers because you're not thinking very well. If you drink too much, it will basically slow things down to the point that you can't walk straight, okay? You can't remember things. You definitely shouldn't be driving, right? And you tend to do stupid things, okay? At low doses, you get euphoria, yes. When you only have a little bit of alcohol, it relaxes you, makes you feel good, right? But at higher doses, you have decreased reaction time. You can't really respond to things very quickly. You're not so alert, right? You have less control over your body, less behavioral control, so you can't really drive, operate heavy machinery, right? Dangerous in that way, right? At the highest doses, if you drink too much, you will lose consciousness, right? You can black out and pass out. Or, at even higher doses, you can go into a coma and even die. Luckily, usually before you die of too much alcohol, you usually black out before that. The problem is that if you drink a lot and you drink really fast, okay, you can consume too much alcohol. You can drink beyond the point of consciousness, beyond the point of blacking out, okay? So it hasn't hit you there. You haven't passed out, but you can actually pass out and then eventually die because you drank way too much because you drank really fast. Take it easy, take it slow if you're gonna drink it, and don't overdo it. And if you're not at least 21, you shouldn't be doing it, but we know that a lot of people drink before they're legal age. A lot of people go to Mexico where you can drink before you're, and by the time you're 18. And even then you get a fake ID, right? But yeah, that's alcohol, it's a legal drug. It's very dangerous, right? If you overdo it. And it comes in many forms, you know, your wine, your hard liquor, your cocktails, you know, a lot of different forms. It's all alcohol. That's what's having the effect. There are also narcotics. The narcotics are so-called opioids. They reduce pain, right? But they also bind to the endorphin receptors. They also give you euphoria. They also make you feel good, the narcotics. So narcotics reduce pain and make you feel good. They come in many forms. There's opium, right? Actually, the opium poppy is the flower that grows. And then from there, from the opium, they will derive the morphine and heroin, which is a legal street drug, right? But there's also other drugs that are derived from opium, from the opium poppy. Medications like hydrocodone, oxycontin, codeine, which is less potent. Believe it or not, I've had hydrocodone. I've had that. Actually, I have some on me right now. What happened, I don't know if I told you guys, but 3 weeks ago today, I actually was riding my mountain bike up in the mountains, and I had a nasty fall. I had a nasty spill. You know, I had what's called a washout, where the front tire kind of slid to the side, and the stupid bike slammed me into the ground. You know, I broke some ribs, and they gave me some strong pain medication. They gave me hydrocodone, and I was taking it. It works, you know, and I felt better. And let's just put it this way: I didn't finish it. I still have 4 pills left there, and I've run out of the. They also gave me another type of medication. It's just ibuprofen, which is not as bad, not as addicting. That, you know. But I didn't take the last 4 pills of hydrocodone. They're right there. And I'm trying, and now I've run out of the other medicine. So I'm thinking about whether I should take that last 4. I still have a little bit of pain, but I'm thinking maybe I'm going to stay away from it, right? I haven't gotten hooked on it, and I hope I don't, because when you get hooked on that stuff, the hydrocodone, the oxycontin, codeine is not as dangerous. That's less potent, but that's what a lot of these people have gotten hooked on. It's causing a lot of people to overdose and die, basically. You know, a lot of people dying from these drugs, getting hooked on these drugs. And yes, they are used, a lot of them are used basically for pain medication, right? When you're in severe pain, like if you're gonna go through surgery, or you know, you have a broken rib, you know, well, broken ribs like me, they gave me some of that stuff, but I followed the directions, take them every so many hours. I think it's every 6 hours. And they only gave me like, you know, like 20 friggin' pills, okay? It didn't last very long, and I haven't even taken the last 4. And I probably won't, just to be safe, make sure, not that I don't think I'm gonna get hooked with 4, but still, it's dangerous stuff. Make sure you follow the doctor's orders, the directions. And even when you do, you can still get addicted. And once you get addicted and you start getting these drugs illegally and you're hooked, then you're in real danger and you can die from this stuff, okay? You can just die, all right? So they need to be closely monitored when they're used as pain medication. They're very addicting, right? And when you try to get off of them, you get severe withdrawal symptoms. It's like having a really bad flu. You feel like you're gonna die. Methadone is used to control heroin dependency. It doesn't produce the euphoria, right? So people can inject themselves with methadone rather than heroin to try to, you know, get off the drug. But it's very dangerous stuff. And it, you know, not the heroin, but the hydrocodone, oxycontin, and many other different types of drugs derived from opium are actually used as pain medication. And yeah, you have to be very careful with that stuff. Hallucinogens, okay, other drugs. These hallucinogens, well, what do? Well, they make you hallucinate. In other words, they distort things. They distort your mind, so to speak. So they're often called psychedelic drugs as well, psychedelic. So they distort sensations and perceptions. So they make things appear differently, feel differently, right? They change how your mind perceives things. They can cause hallucinations and even out-of-body sensations where you feel like your spirit is leaving your body and that you're floating away or something like that. One example is LSD. LSD is a very powerful drug, powerful synthetic drug made from a fungus. It's made from a fungus, actually, and can be used to expand your conscious awareness. When you're on LSD, colors seem more intense, sounds seem more beautiful, right? And also, if you do art, if you paint or you make music or poetry, when you're on LSD, you think that somehow you're this creative genius, and it seems to, you think that you can do all these things, right? And you think it's wonderful, but in reality, the stuff you were doing still kind of sucks. If it sucks, if your work sucks before LSD, it also sucks afterward, okay? But you think it's gonna be awesome when you're on this stuff. So it will, make you feel wonderful. Okay, I don't know from experience, right? But as a street drug, it's, in the past, I know they used to call it acid, right? Like dropping acid or doing some acid, right? It really distorts things. It makes things feel very different. It makes things feel more wonderful, colors more vibrant, sounds more beautiful, poetry more enjoyable, right? But you can also have what's called a bad trip, right? Where you're on the stuff, and instead of experiencing wonderful things, it scares the hell out of you, and you get really afraid, and you think you see demons, and you think people are trying to kill you. And even after you're off the drug, you can have flashbacks where you can have those bad trips again, and that freak you out or really scare the hell out of you. That's LSD. And then there's also PCP, which is also referred to as angel dust. Depending on how much you take, depending on dosage, it can cause you to hallucinate. It can just stimulate you and give you more of a sense of energy and power. It can act like a depressant, right? Or a painkiller. It's been known to lead to violence, right? Where people get crazy and they try to kill themselves or other people, right? Lead to suicide, self-harm, right? Irrational behavior, like people basically trying to ram their head through a wall because they don't feel any pain and they feel like they're Superman, something like that. Look at what I can do. I can totally do this. And you think like you're indestructible. You don't feel any pain. You feel like you can, ram through that wall. You think you can fly and you jump out the window. Really dangerous stuff. Okay, that's PCP, angel dust. Okay, mescaline is another hallucinogen. Comes from the peyote cactus. Okay, comes from a cactus, often used by Native Americans for religious and spiritual rituals. Okay, because it produces out-of-body sensations. You take the stuff, and it's like you feel like, like you can go on a quest, or like your spirit is leaving your body, or talk with your spirit animal, or whatever it is, right? It can cause some weird effects, basically, things that you might consider to be spiritual, okay? That's mescaline, okay? And it just, it's distorting your sensations, your mind, basically, is what's happening. There's also marijuana. Marijuana is also a hallucinogen, okay? The leaves and flowers of marijuana are called cannabis, right? The active ingredient is called tetrahydrocannabinol, THC, okay? What does it do? I don't know by experience. That's how much of a good boy I am. I haven't even taken this stuff, okay? But it's supposed to make you feel good, produces a feeling of well-being, mild intoxication, right? Somewhat relaxing, right? Mild sensory distortions. Time seems to slow down a little bit, things seem to be just slowed down. As a matter of fact, if you try to drive while you're high, what happens is you drive too damn slow and you can't keep up with traffic, okay? That's what happens. The research has shown on marijuana. At higher doses, it can produce hallucinations where you think your dog is talking to you or something like that. Okay, that's marijuana. It will also, of course, affect your concentration, makes it harder for you to concentrate, harder for you to learn, okay? So it's not good for, being a productive student, right? Not good for work, right? It'll slow your reaction time, right? You react more slowly to things, okay? And like I said, also in higher doses, it can also trigger anxiety, right? And make you feel like paranoid, right? And interfere with memory. Habitual use of marijuana, long-term use of marijuana does destroy brain cells in the hippocampus, which is involved with memory, will affect your memory, and basically over time will make you seem like you're less intelligent because it will affect the functioning of your brain. It can also be used for medical purposes, seems to stimulate appetite, help with nausea and vomiting, things like that. Stimulating appetite, that can be a good thing, and reduce nausea and vomiting. Like people who are undergoing chemotherapy, for instance, often get very nauseous because of the radiation, and they don't have much of an appetite and they get thin. Well, this, as you know, marijuana gives you the munchies, right? It stimulates your appetite and it can help with those kinds of things. there's a whole bunch of other studies that are being done on marijuana and what it can be useful for. And it's now legal in this state and in other states, and it's going to be legal even more states in the future. Some states are going to vote on it this November to legalize it. Still illegal at the federal level, from federal government, okay? So you can still get in trouble depending on who stops you, who pulls you over, okay? If it's a federal agent, you're in trouble. If it's at the state level, local level, then, and it's legal in your state, probably okay. Okay, so those were hallucinogens. Those were some of the drugs. There's many other drugs, and they're coming up with new ones all the time, both legal and illegal drugs. New ones are being created all the time, okay? But this next section is devoted to other things that you can do to get some of the same effects that you get with drugs. So you don't have to necessarily resort to drugs. You can do other things. You can try hypnosis to deal with a problem or with a craving or something like that, rather than turning to drugs. Because the reason people do drugs in the first place is basically to feel good, to feel better, or to cope with reality, to deal with some problem, okay? To deal with some issue. It's self-medication, okay? Drugs are medication, even the illegal drugs, your illegal ones, right? You're doing it to make things better for you in some way, okay? But there's other things you can do. One of those things is hypnosis. Hypnosis is a state of consciousness in which the person is especially susceptible to suggestion. So when you are hypnotized, basically it's like they put you in a trance. And it's like you are more easily led by other people's suggestions. So they can convince you, for instance, that you're not afraid of flying, if you are afraid of flying, and maybe then you'll be willing to get in an airplane. They can convince you that you're more relaxed, okay? That you feel less pain, okay? There's four elements of hypnosis that you should be aware of. With hypnosis, the hypnotist tells the person to focus on what is being said. So just listen to my sound of the voice, my voice, okay? Relax. Or you might have seen in the movies or on TV in the cartoons where somebody will hold like a watch, just like the second image there, right? And they'll dangle in front of you and say, focus on the watch, right? Or look at this pattern, this swirly kind of pattern there. And you're told to relax, right? You're told to let go, right? And accept the suggestions, right? Let go, okay? And you're also told to use your imagination. Sometimes it's used basically to help you remember things or help you basically relive things, you know? So it's something where they put you in some kind of trance. But there is debate about what hypnosis is actually doing, okay? And what it's useful for. Research has shown that it can be useful for pain management. So if you are in a trance and you are under somebody's spell, so to speak, right? And they tell you that you don't feel so much pain and you believe it, right? Then you'll actually feel less pain. It's kind of like the placebo effect. It can be used as a treatment for depression and anxiety. You can feel less depressed, less anxious, right? If you do follow the suggestions and you let go, so to speak. Can be useful for quitting smoking, helping you lose weight, or just in general, just relax, right? When you're under this other person's spell or in this trance. The thing is that there is debate about hypnosis, about whether it's real or not. Are you really in some altered state of consciousness? Are you really under somebody else's spell? So there's two different theories of this, right? Two different explanations. According to dissociative theory, hypnosis is a real altered state of consciousness. You really are under somebody else's spell, in some kind of trance. And when you're in this altered state of consciousness, you can tap into things that are hidden in your unconscious or other things, into your fears and desires, other things, and it can help you. It can be therapeutic. It can help you feel less pain or let go of things. That's according to dissociative theory. But according to social cognitive theory says these things have to do more with learning. Social cognitive theory says that hypnosis is not really an altered state of consciousness. That people are just going along with what they're told. They're pretending, so to speak. So you're told to let go, so you let go. You're told to relax, so you relax. You're told that you feel less pain, so you say you feel less pain. And you're just playing the part, right? Here's some facts about hypnosis, okay? People cannot be hypnotized against their will. If you don't believe in it, you cannot be hypnotized, okay? If you don't go along with it. So it's not the case that somebody's gonna jump out of the bushes and make you stare into their eyes and put you under a spell and then have their way with you. That's not gonna happen, okay? It's not that powerful like the way it may seem in the movies or in the cartoons or animations, okay? The hypnotized person is really the one under control. You are still under control, okay? And when you go along with the other person's telling you, you're doing so willingly, okay? They can't really make you do things against your will. The hypnotist may actually guide the person in a relaxed state, right? They guide you into thinking about certain things and feeling certain things, right? But hypnosis cannot really be used to enhance your memory. It doesn't really work for those things. It can actually lead to false memories. And when we talk about memories, this will come up again, how hypnosis has been used in therapy to help people recover memories, and then how people afterward can claim that they were physically abused or raped or something like that. And maybe it didn't happen. Maybe it's just part of what you've been asked to imagine. It's controversial is what I'm saying, you know, but we'll talk more about that when we talk about memory. That's hypnosis. There's other things you can do to make yourself feel better. Hey, why don't you try meditation? You want to relax, you want to feel less pain, right? You want to feel better, want to cope with your stress, your anxiety, right? You don't have to turn to, you know, drugs, whether it's alcohol or smoking or other drugs. Try meditation, learn about that. I don't really know how to do it, but some have said that it might be an altered state of consciousness, right? Where you know, it's a state of extreme relaxation is what it is, right? It really helps you relax, right? It suppresses the activity of the nervous system. So it lowers your blood pressure, reduces hypertension, lowers your metabolism, right? Can lower your heart rate, your stress, release tension in your muscles, help you sleep. It helps you relax. Form of meditation, okay? That's meditation. You kind of have to learn how to do it. Usually they have some kind of mantra or some kind of word that they focus on where they repeat over and over again. You close your eyes, you focus on your breathing. And if you do it really well, you get very, very relaxed. So relaxed and so in tune with your body that it's been said that after a while, you can hear your own heartbeat, okay? That's a meditation. I don't really know how to do it, but I do things that can approach kind of meditation. You know, because you think about it, when you listen to music, right, and you're by yourself and you're just very relaxed, that's kind of a little bit like meditation. Or when you go out into the wilderness, into the woods or up into the hills all by yourself and you feel very relaxed, that's like also a little bit like meditation. It's just you're relaxing and you're in tune with yourself and nature and stuff. So there's other things you can do is the point. Just to tell you some other ones, right? So I mentioned meditation, other ways to cope with stress, with sleep problems, with depression. So there's meditation, but exercise can also be very useful, okay? Exercise is actually not that useful for losing weight. If you use exercise with diet, that'll work better, but exercise by itself is very hard to lose weight that way, okay? No, 15 minutes a day aren't really gonna help you, okay? You really wanna use exercise to lose weight, you better be putting in an hour or more per day, okay? And following a healthy diet. But exercise also has a lot of psychological benefits. Exercise will also reduce your stress, okay? Increase endorphins and make you feel better. It can reduce depression, reduce anxiety. It can be very, very useful, not just physically, but psychologically, it can even be more powerful. That's the reason I, you know, go off into the hills and, you know, for me, it started with just hiking and then it turned into jogging, you know, and then, and then I started bike riding. And then I had that nasty spill, right? And now I'm having doubts about that. And I said, maybe I need to go back to jogging because it's safer. Because when you're off in that hill, you can encounter some dangerous situations with, you know, very slippery dirt and rocks and stuff like that. And yeah, you wear a helmet and stuff like that and some knee pads, some elbow pads, try to stay safe. But are you going to be in a suit of armor? No. Okay. It's very dangerous, you know, certain forms of exercise. And yeah, I'll tell you this, when I had that nasty spill on my bike, if I wouldn't have been wearing a helmet, I would be dead. I hit the ground really hard and I hit with my head and my ribs and I broke some ribs. My ribs were not protected, my head was, right? But yeah, exercise can be very useful. Just try to do forms of it that are safe, okay? You know, yeah, bike riding and especially mountain biking, stuff like that can be dangerous, you know, so pick some good forms of exercise. Swimming is very good for you. Basketball, jogging, hiking, that kind of stuff. Try to keep it safe. Yoga, right? You know, that's what they're doing there. Yoga can be very useful. I don't know how to do yoga, but I hear that it's physically demanding and can be very relaxing and has a lot of psychological benefits, just like exercise. Breathing exercises in general can be very useful. Just learning how to breathe properly, right? Because part of relaxation is just breathing properly. And when you get stressed, when you get anxious, you're not breathing properly, okay? So there's many things you can do. And that is the end. Okay, let me stop recording.